Welcome to Decoding Parenthood, where we unleash the secrets of parenting. Today we have Miss Liz with us, who is a psychotherapist. She's also a counselor, and she claims that she trains people. So we are going to be talking today about burnout. Burnout that can occur not only to a parents, to caregivers, to teachers, to educators, to everybody in society, and how we can work towards maybe helping each other out of the burnout. So, welcome, Ms. Liz. We are happy to have you back again on our podcast. So, okay, if you can just give a brief introduction about yourself to our listeners and our viewers, that would be great.
Absolutely. So my name is Kathleen, and I go by Liz Childs, and I am an LCPC, licensed clinical professional counselor. I've been practicing now for about 23 years, and the reason why I would say practicing, no one ever mastered this. There's no such thing as a guru. No one knows it all, and no one is good all the time. And I've had my private practice now for 17 years, and I've been a certified trauma therapist for I think at least 12 years. So I've been doing this a very long time. And so you can always reach me. I'm sure my information will be in the description. So please feel free if you have any questions. Love to hear from you.
Awesome. So, Miss Liz, we in our society, especially after COVID, everybody blames the pandemic for everything nowadays, but I also feel it was pre-COVID. We just didn't realize it was happening. But, what causes these burnouts? And I know it could be a big answer. And, just giving us, many times we might be going through a burnout and you don't even realize that you're going through it because there's so much going on in your life and you just feel like you have to get everything done. So what are the signs or the clues that we should be looking at, like for yourself or maybe for your loved ones if they're going through a burnout?
Oh, that is a big question. There's a big answer. And I think you're absolutely correct. I think that it's prior to the pandemic, we are a society and culture for instant gratification and we have a lot of fatigue. We have a lot of overwhelm. I think the real pandemic is actually unmitigated stress and emotional dysregulation. And we don't teach those things most of the time. And we don't teach a work-life balance. We glorify the hustle and grind. And what really needs to happen is we really need to focus on how that having burnout, having compassion fatigue, getting into that overwhelm or having stress is not due to a lack of resilience or willpower. It's actually due to a good number of things. So we actually get to go over what is burnout. So like you said, what are some of the signs that we look for? So we want to look for, is there a difference in appetite? Are you eating too much? Are you eating too little? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you getting enough, fresh air, exercise? And you don't have to go to the gym for 2 hours a day. Most of my parents don't have time for that. It's just being able to get enough exercise for 10 minutes just to increase your heart rate will actually help to boost and improve your mood. Just being able to take a break. So a lot of times we also want to look for, mood shifts and swings. It's are you feeling overwhelmed? Are you chronically tired? Do you feel that no matter what you do, does it feel futile? Do you feel hopeless or helpless? Do you feel disappointed, discouraged? Is your work environment toxic? So with burnout, it looks different among the work population than it does for caregivers or parents or teachers. It's because if you find yourself dreading going into work or that you're not getting, you're having trouble getting out of bed and getting up, those are really big signs. And it's no matter how many times you take a break, do you feel like it's not working? So there's 5 stages to burnout. And The first one is like, most people, when they first get a job, they're excited. They're encouraged. We call this the honeymoon phase. So they're excited, they're encouraged, they do their work enthusiastically, they get plenty of feedback, they feel encouraged, it's like in their productivity and efficacy up. And it's like, so that's the first stage. It's like, which is no problem. But then there's the introduction of stress where you start to notice it's like just a little bit harder to go into it. Some days are better than others. But you want to start looking at like, so what are some of those days? What are some of the common factors and, common denominators? So, and then it's like, that introduction, we want to head that off of the pass. So it's like those little things where you're just like, oh, this one kid gets me, or this one parent. Oh my gosh, I don't know what to do with that. But you get to look at yourself. And that's where the self-awareness actually comes into play. So it's like, know your limitations, know what it is that triggers you, being able to work on yourself. So then there's more of like, we get more into like longer term kind of stress where you're kind of feeling like a bit overwhelmed. That's when we start to go, okay, like perhaps we need to like, if you need to talk to a professional, there is no shame in actually going to somebody. It's like, because I have so many people that come in and go, okay, my spouse is telling me, please go talk to somebody. I can't, I'm sick of hearing it. Or like if you're talking to your parents or something, and like friends, they're biased. As much as they may love you, as much as they want to support you, they got their own stuff. It's like, go to a professional. It's confidential. It's private. Usually it's included with your insurance, mental health care. And that's the whole point, is they can teach you tricks and tips and tools that can actually get you through those times. The next stage is we go into chronic stress. And this, I can't emphasize this enough, is when you have chronic stress, you can actually get a type of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And from chronic stress, it affects your brain. Neuroscientifically, when you are under a tremendous amount of stress for a long period of time, it's going to decrease your gray matter. Your gray matter is your higher thinking, your creative problem solving. And then you're less likely to be able to regulate your nervous system. So that's another sign that we look for with burnout is like, are you becoming more irritable? Are you snapping at your kids? Like, are you not able to see or you have any joy in anything? That's one of the things we look for. The last stage is when we get into like, now we're overwhelmed. We are burned out. There is a chronic exhaustion, and that negativity, that toxicity that can develop into, generalized anxiety disorder, panic attacks, go into like depression, even suicidal feelings. We want to like make sure we don't get to that. But when you get to that point, sometimes there needs to be like a medical intervention, therapeutic intervention. And then it's like even looking at, like the actual physical. So burnout is a very serious problem. I think a lot of people don't recognize the signs until it becomes too late. And when it's too late, it's like, it can take anywhere from 6 months to 5 years to overcome burnout, depending on the severity of it and what the issue or problem was. And it's like, and it's like if it's one of your kids or your spouse or aging parent, you may have bereavement or grief also going into that and like slowly losing a dying parent. So there's lots of things that go into that. And then so those caregivers, the ones who have special needs children, that burnout is like parents a lot of times can feel shame or guilt about getting mad at a scenario or situation. This is where, parents need support. Caregivers need support in how to take care of themselves. So one of the ways in which we treat burnout is looking at boundaries. So it's like you get to have self-boundaries too. A lot of people don't know that there are actually 7 different types of boundaries. Self-boundaries, where you're keeping that for yourself, what you're saying, what is and is not okay, validating your own feeling, is like, maintaining a routine and a structure, like take breaks. A lot of times for my moms, there's that guilt around, but I have to put everyone else in front of me. Please don't do that. It's counterintuitive because it actually doesn't help your child. It does not help your spouse. If anything, most of us can kind of turn into very defensive, even like emotionally destructive people. And that's putting it mildly and nicely. Everyone needs to be able to vent to somebody. Everyone needs to be able to to be able to feel and have a break. So
is listening to all of it, which is amazing info, is burnout a combination of things? Like combination of things like something's wrong at work or something's wrong at personal life, or is burnout just one thing?
no, it can be many.
It can be many things.
It can be, because there's lots of different variables into it. I mean, so like if you work in a high stress environment, perhaps you have like, maybe your company is, underemployed, so there's not as many employees, and it's like they keep putting work onto you. Maybe you're not paid as much, or, what you're worth. Maybe you're not given enough time off in the day. And it's like you're told and asked to work over. Perhaps, if you're a single parent, male or female, and, it's like now you're responsible for the majority of the care for your child or children. And it's, so home and work, there needs to be, that's another important boundary, is there needs to be a delineation between two. So it's like you're not bringing work home, but you're not taking home to work.
To work either. Yeah.
And it's like, which is very, very hard to do. Because it's like, whatever happens at home is going to affect you. And whatever happens at work is going, because, when you go to work, that's only the first 8 hours of your day. It's like, and then you come home and it's like, once you're a parent, you are a parent 24/7, 365 for the rest of your life.
Yep.
So it's like, that doesn't stop when they're 18. And then they're always going to look to you. And it's like having boundaries for yourself and learning your own self-care, learning your own triggers. This is why I encourage people to journal, to meditate. The more you can self-regulate and you can deal with the feelings, don't believe everything you think and feel, the better able that you're actually to be there for people as they need you, but not allowing them to become dependent on you. That's a big difference. Because when they become dependent on you, that's when it's like, that's a boundary breach in and of itself, because you can never give that person enough if they're not learning how to be self-reliant, if they're not learning how to have those boundaries and take care of themselves. So it's like, it's really great to, to help the kids and do all the things for them and like, support and love them. But you also need to be able to say no and go, no, this is mom time. This is mommy, daddy time. I do couples therapy as well. And just go, no, this is for me. This is for us. And I need to take care of me. It is not selfishness, it's self-preservation. So what we found in all the neuroscience says, the more you're able to take care of yourself, the more altruistic you become, the better and more able you are to be there for.
So how does burnout correlate with depression?
Well, depression can be almost delusional.
Okay.
And so this is where people think that they're a burden. They think that they're a disappointment. They think that sometimes, like, if they become suicidal, that the world is better off without them, that they failed in some way, the world would be better off without them. I can assure you that is rarely okay.
So burnout, so if a person is burning out for multiple reasons, and it could be for home and for work, can that eventually, if not taken care of, can that lead to depression?
100%. 100%, because like it's hard to regulate your emotions. If you feel like you're not capable, or if you don't find any joy, or there's no purpose in life. Everyone needs something to look forward to. But if that's all you're seeing is darkness, everything looks bleak, nothing that you do matters, or that you do not have support or a structure, foundation, you don't have friends, it's hard to come out of that. That's why I applaud anybody who's ever clawed their way out of a dark place and yet will still want to be there for other people. Including, sometimes when other people don't exactly deserve it or even acknowledge it.
Right. So let's talk about ways on how one can work on themselves, because I feel like, I know you mentioned journaling and meditation, but more than taking care of everybody else, it's important to take care of yourself so you can function better and do things better. So according to you, in a day, in just a general day, how can one take care of themselves and their needs? Like, what are the things? Like, would you add 30 minutes towards yourself? Would you add an hour? Would you add 2 hours? Or is there even a number that, justifies? Because some people might need only 30 minutes. Some people might need 2 hours. So how can we, for our viewers and our listeners, if they want to do self-care, what are the things they should be doing? How often? And in a day, when they should be scheduled? Is it best to do it in the morning? Is it best to do it at night? Is it best to take a break in the afternoon? What are those ideal, schedules?
So it's a great question. It's also, I'm going to tell you that it varies, because it's one of those things that, only you can know your mind and your body, and everybody's mind and body is different. Your chemistry is different. Even like the cultural differences, your family history. So, whether meditation or journaling is best in the morning or in the evening, I would say both. But how much time to add, that also completely varies for the person. So yeah, some people are going to have a really hard time just adding an extra 10 minutes into their day. Others are going to be like, oh, I don't even report into work or do anything before 10 a.m., kind of thing. The one thing I can tell you, the body loves routine. So to establish, not only trust within ourselves and resiliency, is that we need to be able to have safety and predictability. So integrity is actually being your word to yourself. So when you say that you're going to do something and you follow through, that's what builds self-esteem, self-confidence. That's integrity. So when you have a routine and you're doing something for yourself, this is super important. And as your body begins to fall into line with that, it's like you start to crave that time. Like alone time for everybody is actually an amazing thing. Like getting to know yourself. There's some with journaling, a lot of my clients are like, I don't want to do journaling. Well, nobody does. In the beginning, to be able to sit with yourself, to ask yourself like really hard questions, to understand where your story and your values come from, the way you think, the way you respond, that's power. So, and it's like, we have power and we influence, we don't have control. So one of the things, I actually read a quote this morning that said, when we are no longer able to control a situation, we now get to look at changing ourselves. Viktor Frankl. So it's like, so that's the challenge of it. We get to the challenge is to change ourselves in a way that actually affords us. We have this tendency within this westernized culture to think that it's like, the more that we hustle, the more we grind, and like, capitalism, I can earn money and I can do this and I can do that. And it's like, well, that's really, really great. But if you have a tendency to think that having more things and having more money like makes you a better person than everybody else, then you're one of the poorest people on earth. And it's like, so being able to love and know yourself is of paramount importance. So having a routine, whether that's like first thing you do when you get up in the morning, you go to the bathroom, you wash your hands, you brush your teeth, you get in the shower, doing whatever it is whatever you do it with purpose. And you do that and you follow through with that. And then as you go through your day, take lots of breaks. The mind is not actually meant to sit for 8 hours and doing the same repetitive thing. Even just taking a 1 minute break, 1 minute, almost everybody can do that. 1 minute break to actually focus on your body, focus on your breath, and where you're feeling that and what's actually going to be, just a check-in will begin to actually reset your nervous system to the current situation. Helps to reset your mind. So now we can creatively problem solve. If you're feeling that sense of like overwhelm, this is where we also get to have boundaries for ourselves. People do not like when I bring up boundaries. Boundary is really where you end and something else begin. We need to learn how to delegate. I'm talking to a lot of my perfectionists out there. They go, well, but if it's going to get done right, I have to do it myself. Perhaps not. Perhaps we can appreciate. There's even when we actually stop and we take a breath and we actually practice gratitude, that whole attitude of gratitude is not just, pop psychology. It is actually very important. And gratitude, a practice of having gratitude, will actually change the structure of the brain. So, and then we find that we don't get as burned out because we're able to reframe a situation. Instead of overwhelm, we get to look at being busy, but with purpose. When we have creative ability and problem solving, things aren't quite as hard. And then now we can actually provide that structure, that routine. So, and then when you get home, okay, sitting down, talking to your kid, having a conversation with your spouse. It's like, if you actually take like my house, we have a rule. It's like 10 minutes. I walk in the door, 10 minutes. No one brings me a problem. No one is screaming. No one is asking for dinner. I get to go and have 10 minutes all to myself and like be able to kind of like decompress from the day. Then I can handle whatever comes up. But it's like, until then, it's like, no, not happening. 10 minutes. And it's like, it teaches structure. And it's like, most things are not like, few things are very rarely ever a crisis. So it's like, most people have 10 minutes and then you're incorporating exercise. Look at your nutrition. There are even supplements that you can take that are going to support your nervous system. And, instead of like doing something mindless, minimize the blue screen, minimize social media. Because we have this whole problem of comparison. We see everybody else doing better than us.
Or going on these vacations that
the vacation.
And you're stuck in the house or stuck at that job that you hate every single day, but you can't get out because you have bills to pay. And well, and a lot of times I have like lots of people who go, well, I can't afford a vacation. No one said you had to go to Paris and stay close to the Arc de Triomphe. No one said that you had to spend 10 grand for you and the two kids to go to. Sometimes it's actually just a break. It's like, take like a longer weekend, like actually go away, even if it's just overnight, like Airbnb, like there's so many different things that you can do. It's just, it's a change of scenery. It's a change of pace. What's going to happen is it takes you out of that environment. And now you have more of an ability to offset that adventure. Like, just have that, reconnect, use that time to reconnect to yourself first. And then like actually relax. So here's a really interesting psychological fact. We found this to be across the board with the research. The ideal vacation time, 9 days. Because if you go like any less than 9 days, let's say you just go for like, 5 days. A lot of people do that. It's like, oh, it's what we can afford. We go for 2 days.
Right? It's like, that actually just takes you out of the environment. And it's like, so it's good. I'm not going to say I'm not going to knock it because I'm like, anything is better than nothing. But it's like, they'll say like, you're not having a chance to actually get yourself out of the environment and come out of that anxious response, coming out of like feeling stressed out. If you go longer than 9 days, what we found is it's harder to come back to work.
Isn't that a bad thing though?
Right. It's harder to come back to work. Because then it's like, what happens is you become resentful and then it's feels like an uphill battle because you've missed too much. Or you're stuck on the beach somewhere and kind of going, I do not want to be here. Whereas 9 days is actually a perfect time. It's a perfect amount, but it's like almost like everybody should actually have at least two, ideally 3 vacations per year.
9 days each. So, we mentioned about journaling. We talked about safety. We talked about routine. We talked about taking breaks now.
And nutrition, exercise.
So coming back to journaling, unfortunately, a lot of people might not know what journaling is. Like, if I open a book, what should I be writing? But I have a book. I went on Amazon and bought this really nice journal, but I don't even know what to write. So what am I writing when I'm journaling? Am I writing gratitude? Because I have heard you should write 5 positive things that happened in your previous day. So when you have a low day, you can go back and look at the journal and see all the positive experiences you have had. But what is journaling? What are we writing?
So that's also a very broad question because there's so many different things, and you can actually journal for mental health. So, but one of the things I like about journaling is bullet journaling. So artists have a saying, because I'm also an artist, just like artists have a saying that, there's nothing more intimidating than a blank canvas because the possibilities are completely limited. So a lot of people actually have to stop before they start. I've even had some people, like a lot of my students and teenagers, that when they start journaling, it's a huge resource. It's really amazing because it gives you a place to vent. But I've had a lot of people say, oh, well, I'm afraid that my parents will read it. My parents will find it. There are ways that you can actually put that on a phone. You can actually use, there's journaling websites. So it's it can actually be password locked. There's also if you choose to have a journal that's, paper, what I tell them, a lot of my kids is if you're afraid of somebody else reading it, I don't even read it. I'm that's for you, for your information. It's to get it out. It's well, so if once you're done with it, you don't have to go back and read it. You don't have to go back and analyze it. I don't want you to overthink anything. Shred it. Or in some safer purposes, burn it. Just put it in the fireplace. It's totally fine. And, but journaling, I think, if you're just going to sit down and just kind of write paragraphs on end, it can be very intimidating. So I tell people, bullet journal, what was the best thing that happened to me today? Or, how did I feel about that? Or, here's what I would have liked to have had happen. Or, what do I think about families or relationships? What does that mean to me? So you're basically just kind of giving yourself a self-examination, but you're doing it in a way that is very succinct and poignant, purposeful, and that is very directed. So it's not just a free fall. And I also have people who tell me well, when I journal, I feel I go back and read it and I'm whining. And I'm well, yeah, that's okay. Whining, complaining does have a place. It has a purpose. So in a lot of times, because let's be real, everybody judges. We all have personal judgment and we also judge people. So, and a lot of times we're super hypercritical of ourselves. But if you start to ask yourself some of the really interesting questions at the end of the day is, well, what did I learn today? So for example, it's we get to normalize failure for our kids. So that's really powerful. So what did you fail at today? What did I get wrong? How am I secure enough to admit when I'm wrong? And it's what could I do better? So it's at this point, you're validating the feeling. You're giving yourself a purpose and a structure. You're actually asking an important question. You become better at problem solving and getting feedback, because feedback is universal. It's neutral. And it's and then going, so what can I do differently? And then it's you get a different result. So we can't always predict and control our environment and what's happening during the day. But to be able to have a place to let that out, just in journaling, even if it's just the date and then what happened that day. And it's literally a paragraph of 4 sentences. That is something in which you are taking time, at least the minimal amount of effort, to learn about yourself, to sit with that. Here's something really cool. The law of observation. You cannot observe a behavior without it having to change. So it's you observe something and it's because we don't want to become hypocritical and we don't want to create a cognitive dissonance, that behavior will begin to change. We don't like being out of sync and we don't noticing something that we don't like and then perpetuating it and keep it happening. It's because even on some level, we're going to recognize I'm self-sabotaging. What can I do about that? So, and this is actually part of that solution. So journaling doesn't have to be laborious, does not have to be tedious, does not have to be long, does not require a huge amount of equipment, does not have to be expensive. So it's actually a really, really great way of getting to know and be in touch with yourself, acknowledging those things and beginning to change them, even if you're not doing a huge routine that feels overwhelming, because we don't want to add to the overwhelm or burnout.
So we're talking about, burnout. And as you mentioned, the burnout happens in all different people. It's not just people in certain workforces. But, we would want to talk specifically burnout happening to parents and burnout happening to educators, because those are the 2 targets, 2 people that we're targeting. So what can, somebody do to not quit their profession and continue to enjoy what they're doing without feeling burnout?
It's an interesting question because I like here in Howard County, Maryland, is that I had a number of teachers that I saw during that time. Of course, a lot of parents and kids too. But I think the teachers' needs, I think, are actually very specific to their profession. And ironically enough, studies have actually indicated that the more enthusiastic and the more passionate that you are about your profession, the more likely you are to suffer burnout. So it's the reason why it's kind of ironic is it's like, you'd think it's like, oh, but I love this, but I love kids and I love teaching and here's the problem. And it's like, and I will preface this by saying it's like, I was a professor for a couple of years teaching psych, but I've never actually been a teacher in the school system. So a lot of what I'm going to say is from the therapist perspective of having teachers, a lot of them in therapy, and a lot of the parents having to deal with the school system. So it's like, it's a good school system. I'm not going to say otherwise. However, I think that there's a lot of times where the needs of the teachers go by the wayside because the way that our school systems are set up, it's not to teach critical thinking. It's not to teach resiliency in life. It's not actually to teach creative problem solving. It's more about teaching future workers and, to basically indoctrinate them into that system and to get as much work and to get as much out of them as they possibly can by paying the least amount. I think teachers have been subjected to that where they are actually made to become parents of the classroom.
That's correct.
And it's like, well, that teacher may only have 60 to 90 minutes for an entire classroom. And I know that there is a lot of rhetoric around inclusion, which, I'm not going to say is wrong, but there needs to be like the separation of like special needs versus general population versus very gifted, talented, advanced placement, behavioral issues. And it's like, yes, that requires more money. That is always going to be an issue. But when teachers are made to earn their pay per se, and it's like that they have to get those stipends, and it's like they're told to get a result and to get however their kids are testing to get the school system more money, it's like you just cheapened what it is that they do. And most teachers are not given that kind of power to actually help the child in the way that they're actually meant to, the way they're trained to. And then they're not paid enough. They're not given enough vacation. And then it's like a lot of times they're having to supplement their classrooms and give more of their time to even meet the demands of what is not being met at home. Because let's face it, in this society and culture, it's like both parents usually have to work.
Yeah.
And there's usually like multiple kids. And it's like special needs a kid need harder. So it's like we've got a lot of people dependent on the teacher to go, here, I need you to teach my child, like raise my child. That is not what a teacher does. Teacher educate. Kind of like when a parent comes to me and says, here, you're a therapist, fix my child. I only get them 1 hour a week, if that. And it's like have to include the parents. So a lot of times I'm not teaching the teacher how to teach. I'm teaching the teacher how to train themselves to be present and available in the healthiest possible way for the child. And then they're having to teach the parents how to train their child in those off hours to live life on life's terms. And then what I do, I'm training the parent how to be a parent. So it's like, but you can't do that if you don't have that emotional availability, if you don't take the time to learn that. And that may actually make a lot of people mad, but it's actually the truth. So it's like when people are getting burned out because they're looking outside of themselves for other people to fix things for them, they're not taking the time for that to actually be with their child. And then they're not taking proper care of themselves first. Because remember what it says, it's not selfish, it's preservation. So it's like, that's one of the biggest problems. So, so instead of like, always asking the teacher, what did you do? Well, how could you do that to my child? And then demanding to get grades. Like perhaps the parent needs to sit down and listen and go, oh, how can I teach my child to respect authority, to sit down and listen, but also to be able to, practice their own time and effort and skills. Right now, our educational system is only teaching memorization, regurgitation, and then instant gratification, usually through like social media. And it's like, they're not learning how to actually social. That's the biggest part of school, socialization.
Also, I feel like many times people think that, if I send my child to XYZ school, I don't need to do anything at home. But
let's just look at that phrase. I'm sorry.
But that's what it is. Like, I'm working, we both are working, we're working 2 jobs, right? We have to work 2 jobs so we can send our child to this XYZ school, and we're sending them to school. So why should we do anything at home? Because the school should be preparing my child for, anything outside. But all the learning has to continue at home also. It's not just, it's not just like you follow rules at school, but you jump off the bed at home, right? So it needs to continue throughout.
Continuity, absolutely. Right. Consistency is the most important thing.
Having a routine is so vital, and not just for parents burnout or for the teachers burnout, for even kids to not burn out, because it's important on how they feel. So when you've already mentioned, but like when parents, they go to conference or they're talking to the teachers, and the teacher says, unfortunately your child didn't have a good day today, and the parent is already tired from work, right? They're going to get frustrated at the teacher because they think it's the teacher's fault.
That is not the teacher's job. The teacher's job is not to be the parent to the child.
Right.
And like, you're right. I think it's a very important point. It's like, it's like we all have frustration. We all have good and bad days. We all most of us have to work to pay bills. And it's like, and guess what? I'm not going to like my answer is the fact that it's like, it is not your job, not the teacher's job to parent the child.
Right.
So it's just like, like between like people always think it's like, oh, when I give them assignments or when I'm teaching them or I'm doing something with them and I teach them the technique in therapy. Therapy is not just something that you do for that hour. And then it's like, I have so many people that I swear they will walk out of my office and then, completely forget everything when they walk out that door. And then they come back the next week and I'll be like, so how was the assignment? How'd that work for you?
They're like,
did you practice? And they're like, oh, I forgot. I didn't have time. I'm like, you just deprioritized yourself. So it's like therapy is what takes place outside in between the sessions, because it's in implementation, integration. It is the same thing with school. So just like in any behavioral context, consistency is always key. So it's like, if you don't want your kids acting like a hoodlum, if you don't want them acting out, and it's like, and you don't, then it's like, then you get to spend time with them and you get to be consistent. It's like, they don't get to go to school and then pick on other kids or, get really mad and throw things or put the teacher down or it's like interrupt the classroom. And it's like, because everybody loses. And it's like, that is the responsibility of the parent, not the teacher. We don't do crowd control. This is not, this is like, it's like, this is learning time. And it's like, they also need breaks. And I think to empathize with the child, it's like, because the parent, the teacher will actually never know what's actually going on at home. Yeah. And there's lots of things that go on at home that can actually prevent the child. Child hunger is actually a huge problem. It's like, you can't concentrate. It's like your brain can't even function. It's like your brain is actually 63% fat.
And they don't know what they are going through. So if they're hungry, most of the times they don't know what's going on.
Or they're not sleeping.
Right.
Or there's something going on. This is where it's like, I encourage you. Like, as much as you may be frustrated, it's like your kids are also getting that from you. And like, and then from the teachers. And like, teachers need to be able to observe. And it's like, they can observe that behaviorally, but it's up to the parent to implement the training, the teaching between classes, but after school. And it's like, and then, so, because they're going to learn from you. Like you're the example. So it's like, if you cannot teach emotional regulation from a dysregulated system. So it's like, you're mad, if you're sad, if you're hungry, if you're frustrated, if whatever that is, if you're burned out, they're automatically, kids are sponges. They're automatically going to pick it up from you. And then what are they going to do? You're the parent. They love you. They're going to mimic you, but they're not going to mimic you in front of you. They're going to take that to school.
Yeah.
And then it's like, ooh, now everybody's going to pay. And it's going to be 25 times over for however many kids in that classroom. So it's like, no. It's like, so this is where we get to actually, be a community. And it's like, take the village to raise a child, right? This is where we actually get to structure that for each other. And it's like, so, it's part of the population. It's like, this is a societal and cultural norm that doesn't not necessarily need to continue. So we need to look at better ways to support teachers. And then administration, I feel bad for the middle management, because administration is like, they're caught between all three. And it's like, what's one of the hardest dynamics to break is a triangle. So it's like, you have parents, kids, you got the teachers, and then it's like, you're over here. And then there's a lot of splitting, which is a term that's like, oh, he said, she said. And it's like, everybody's being really defeatist about everything. And it's like, that does not create a productive, effective work environment. When people feel devalued and they get frustrated, they want to numb out. It's like they want to check out. This is when people become, they'll become abusive because they're trying to save their ego. When they start to rely on substances, when they snap at their kids, they snap at the family dog. And it's like, and now we're just spreading that around. And then it's like, that becomes consistent. It's like, what do you think your kid's learning from? What do you think? And then they go to school. It's like, then they don't know how to deal with their anger. And then they don't know how to actually communicate with the teacher. And then a lot of times there's shame involved. And then, but I can't tell my teacher that because they say it to my parent. What if they call my parent? And then, oh, now they're really angry at me. Now they're going to take it out on me at home. This is a vicious cycle. It doesn't get to continue happening. So it's like parents and teachers, therapists even, we all get to work on this. And that is really the best way that we can actually head that off the path.
So, today our topic was not to have a burnout. And the main nuggets that we got from those was mainly having, routine, do something for yourself. One of those could be journaling and you could be writing anything. You could be writing something positive that happened, something that you didn't like that maybe you could have done it a different way. Also focus on your health, a 10-minute exercise.
Take lots of breaks.
Take lots of breaks, going on long walks. But we would love to continue to talk about how to talk to children about how to control their anger. So stay tuned. We will have Miss Liz back with us. Until next time, thank you for listening and watching Decoding Parenthood. Thank you so much.